by a show of hands, who of you have heard the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink? All right, quite a few of you. This is a proverb that was first introduced to us by a gentleman by the name of John Haywood back in 1175, 1 or 2 years before I was born. And effectively, what this proverb means is that you can give somebody as many opportunities as you want, but unless they actually accept the opportunity and want to make use of the opportunity, your actions and attempts are fruitless. It's useless. Now, as a trainer and a coach, we've very often in the training and skills development industry joked about this saying, and we've said that you can lead somebody to knowledge, but you can't make them think. You know, as a speaker, as an author, as a trainer and a coach, I very often need to use graphics to help me get my message across. So I looked at a number of these software packages. PowerPoint, Canva, CorelDRAW, all of these. And the one that stood out for me was Adobe Photoshop. It seemed easy enough. So I got the package for myself and I dabbled around with it a little bit. And then I realized maybe I'm a little bit technologically challenged. So I need to get some help. So I enrolled in a course for Photoshop. It was an amazing course, very interesting. We took our laptops along and we did practical exercises. We were shown how to create new layers, how to manipulate pictures and change colors of things. I mean, I was at a point where they nearly taught me how to remove the bags under my eyes from my photographs. And then I left and I used it once or twice. The end result is that I still suck at Photoshop. Every time I need to do something or I need to create a graphic, then I get to a point where I know things have to be done and I know it should be able to be done, but I can't quite remember how, and then I've got to shout and get somebody to come and help me. And it's very frustrating for that person, and it's very frustrating for me not being able to learn. And the biggest problem is that I didn't practice the skill enough. So this brings me back to the horse. I want to say to you tonight that you can lead a horse to water and you can make it drink. All you need to do is feed it enough salt. Now, you may ask, what does a horse and salt and water have to do with us and life in the new normal and leadership for that matter? Glad you asked the question. Let me explain. We live in disruptive times. Yeah, it's this COVID-19 pandemic that we've experienced, artificial intelligence, things like global warming, all kinds of crises that we face on a regular basis. And it affects the performance of our teams. Because our teams and our team members get to the point where they are feeling despondent, they are feeling threatened. Yeah, I'm going to lose my job to a robot. Yeah, we went through this pandemic, now all of a sudden everybody has to work from home. And your role as a leader is primarily to make sure that your team is properly skilled, that they have the necessary skills to carry them into the future and to be high-performing teams. Now, we use a lot of cliches and all these fancy terms when it comes to leadership and teams and the performance of teams. The problem that I find is that leaders today do not want to invest the time and the effort in their people. We want a quick fix. Send them on a Photoshop course for a half day, let them learn how to do a couple of things, and there we go, they all sorted out. It doesn't work that way. You need to apply more salt. Now, as you would have realized by now, I like pictures, I like graphics, I like analogies, I also like acronyms. So I thought it a good idea to take the word salt and turn it into an acronym. And the S in salt for me is the first part of where you are teaching your people. Show and tell. That's the knowledge component. This is teaching them how to do it, showing them, demonstrating it, coaching them. But they're not necessarily going to learn anything from it. Just by giving somebody or by telling somebody something doesn't mean that they will learn it. I once saw a comic strip, we all know Charlie Brown, where Linus was saying to Charlie Brown, he taught Peanuts how to do a trick. And Charlie Brown says to him, so, I don't see him doing the trick. He says, I taught him the trick. I didn't say he can do it. The problem is that we expect people to just do something every time we tell them. I mean, I take my children, for instance. You've got to over and over and over tell them something before they accept it. So just giving somebody knowledge or just explaining something or showing something to a person is not going to help. You need to let them try it out. They need to apply that skill. So if you're teaching a child to tie its shoes, you've got to let them actually try and tie their shoes. Because there's no point in explaining it to them, because what goes from here and eventually comes out here doesn't necessarily work that way. So it's important. They have to apply and try it and practice the skill. But if I take you back to my Photoshop example, then you will find that trying it once or twice or applying it is not necessarily going to guarantee that you know the skill. You are going to have to try it over and over and over, yes, and over, a number of times for a long time. And this is where leaders fall short. We want to teach them, we want to let them try it once, and it looks like they can do it, so off you go and struggle on your own. We don't want to invest the time. It's a long-term project. And the strange thing that happens is in this process, where they are learning it by experience and they are trying it over and over all the time, they're going to make mistakes. And you have to allow those mistakes. Because I can guarantee you not one person sitting here tonight learned something. Okay, maybe one of you might have. But you wouldn't have learned something the first time with somebody just explaining it to you. You would have made a mistake. I can remember as a child learning to ride a bicycle, and I fell off crying because I'd scraped my knees and my elbows, and my father looked at me and he says to me, you won't be able to ride a bicycle until you've fallen off at least 7 times. And I was thinking, another 6 times of this? You have to learn through your mistakes. All of us learn through mistakes. Any role that you fulfill, whether it's a leadership role or any role, you didn't wake up one morning and you suddenly, that was it, I had it. I was now a leader, a teacher, a driver, whatever. If you allow the people to learn by experience, to make the mistakes, they will grow and they will learn that skill. And then you will reach a point where they can teach it forward. Now, teaching it forward comes from a concept that Benjamin Franklin introduced many years ago, where he said that if you want to understand or you want to see if somebody has learned something and understands something, have them explain it to somebody else. Because if they're able to explain it to somebody else, it means that they have learned the skill. They know what it's about. And that's the thing. So you are stressed out in whatever function you are. I mean, most of us, no matter whether you're parents or school teacher, whatever you are in a leadership role. And you are responsible for the learning of others. But if you can get to a point where they are able to teach it forward, you no longer have to worry about spending all the time training them. You have now duplicated yourself in other people to train the next generation. Just add a bit of science to it. Oh, before I do that, let's use an example. That's what I wanted to do. You are now the proud owner of a coffee shop, and you have employed a number of baristas, and you need to teach them how to make coffee. So if I use this salt technique that I'm trying to convince you to apply, you're going to show them how to make the coffee. You're going to teach them all the skills. You're going to, about the temperature of the water, how much coffee to put in, all of these things, how to serve it, the whole process that makes it easy for them to do their job. But they might not be able to grasp how to do it from just explaining and showing it to them. So you're going to let them make a cup of coffee or two. You might not want to serve it to your customers, but at least they'll be able to know how to make a cup of coffee. If you now allow them to, on a regular basis, practice and make coffee over and over, they are going to start getting better at it. You can do it under supervision. You can do it in a controlled environment without exposing them to your customers. But they are going to learn. And what will happen is that through making mistakes, which they will make, they will learn and gain the experience. But in the process, by allowing them to make the mistakes, they will realize that it's not the end of the world. And it will free them up to be more creative. And you'll be surprised and find that they might even start finding new ways and different ways and better ways of making the coffee and creating a better service environment for your clients and your customers. I had a large client once that was in the warehousing industry, and when they introduced new people, they worked against the clock and they had deadlines to meet when it came to getting the containers packed and ready for shipping. So you couldn't allow a new person that was slow, because it would slow up the whole process. So what they would do is the first 2 hours of the day, they would allow half of the people that worked on the shift would be new people. And they knew they'd be slow. But by 10 o'clock at tea time, they would remove them, and then they'd put the regular people on so that they could catch up and meet their target at the end of the day. And what they found is that the more they did this, after 2 or 3 weeks, these people were working full shifts at the full speed. But that's because you allowed them in a controlled and a safe environment to learn that skill and to get better. So that's the concept of the salt. As I said, let's add some science to this. I didn't do science at school. I did accounting, so I'm not going to claim to be a scientist or know anything. But basically, our brain is made up of a whole bunch of nerves. Actually, a lot more than a whole bunch. And it sends electrical pulses back and forth between the brain and the rest of the parts of the body that tells the brain what's happening in this. And what happens in these nerve endings or nerves in the brain called axons is that the more you do something, the more you repeat an action, the faster these electrical pulses start moving. And eventually, it becomes part of your subconscious that you do it automatically. Years ago, I attended a course and they were trying to explain about how to create habits. It was actually more about positive attitude. And they explained that if you take a horse and you put it in a corral, you know, those round wooden things that the horse on the farm walks round and round, and the horse moves continuously in a clockwise direction. You can turn that horse around in the other direction. It's automatically going to turn around and go clockwise again, no matter how many times you turn it this way. You're going to have to forcibly lead it in the opposite direction for at least 30 days. And if you then leave it, it will automatically walk in the anti-clockwise direction. And if you turn it back clockwise, it's going to turn anti-clockwise. And the same applies to anything that we're teaching people. It has to be done over and over and over again. So if I take this concept of salt, what I'm saying to you, if you want to train people, no matter what environment you're in, and you want people to learn a skill and to make sure that they know and that they are safe with applying that skill, give them the knowledge. Allow them to practice it over and over again until they gain enough experience that it practically becomes automatic. And you will then achieve your goal that you want and have your high-performing teams or your successful groups, whatever it is that you are trying to achieve. Another story about salt that I thought I'd add. Salt is a very interesting product. It's one of the cheapest products in the world, and it's the one product that almost never gets advertised. But it's used everywhere. It's mentioned everywhere, even in the Bible. It talks about salt. Now, my cousin had owned a hotel in South Africa on the west coast of the Western Cape, a little town called Paternoster, if any of you know about it. He's since retired and handed it over to his son. But in the area, the locals there have a delicacy. You call it a delicacy. It is salted, dried fish. It's called Bokums. If you ever go down to the Western Cape, you ask for Bokums. It looks similar, the fish is similar to a trout, and it gets placed into an extremely salty brine mixture for a couple of weeks, and then it gets taken out and hung in bunches in the sun to dry. And when it's dry, it's like a fish jerky, or as we say in this part of the world, fish biltong. But it's incredibly salty. So what my cousin used to do is he owned this hotel. So in the door of the pub, walking into the pub, he used to hang one or two of these bunches of Bokums in the door. And everybody that used to come in used to say, whose are these? He said, no, help yourself, it's free, go for it. And they used to take the Bokums and peel them and sit there eating the Bokums. What they didn't realize is that the more they ate, the thirstier they got because of the intense saltiness. And the thirstier they got, the more beer they drank. And he was happy. He had achieved his goal. So to get back to my original statement, you can lead a horse to water, and you can make it drink. All you need to do is feed it enough salt, and it will drink by itself.